Morning, Riley. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing, Clint?
Good. Hey, everybody. Clint McLaughlin here with Midwest Market Management. Got Riley Sykard with me here today. We're going to talk a little bit about Safrinha corn crop. Try to keep that into perspective of total production on a global scale, and what bushels are at risk out there and how things are going. Before we get started, currently got D's corn's up about a quarter cent, trading 445. Got pretty good run in the soybeans going here today. Beans are up 15 or so. Got November beans up 13 and a half. So I've got a report coming up next week. Seems like we've got the corn to soybean ratio a little bit out of whack. So maybe a little front running in front of the report. So don't want to spend too much time on markets, but that's kind of what we see here today. So Riley, let's go ahead and hop into the maps here and get a look at what's going on down in southern Brazil.
Sounds good. Um, First thing I want to do every time we start doing this, I want to put it in perspective to guys how big of an area we're talking about when we're talking about the Safrinha crop. Areas to watch there in southern Brazil, Mato Grosso, Paraná, and areas in between are kind of the areas we want to be looking at. So in that central to southern area of Brazil is what weather you need to be watching closely. Um, Another thing to keep your mind on, just that one chunk Mato Grosso, 50% of the Safrinha corn production comes just from this state. And if you compare it to the US, pretty quick and easy to see, only half the crop, and that's covering almost the entire Midwest. So this is not a little small, gross area to be keeping an eye on. People ask us all the time, Clint, if you agree with me here. People ask, what's going on with the Safrinha area? And that's a hard question to answer because the volume and amount of acres that you're looking at. So
Correct, absolutely. It's a big geographical scale, very widespread. One thing I'd like to point out, the Safrinha corn crop is responsible for about 3.5 to 4 billion bushels of the total global corn production, which is usually around 23, 24 billion. So I think last time I run the calculator through that, it's about 18% of the global production comes out of this crop that's growing right here and now.
yep. So next thing we do want to look at here, planning progress hasn't updated. That will come out on Friday, but next to done, 93% on average. We're at the point now where corn's poking out of the ground, or some of it's been out for a while and continuing to grow. So it's at a time where rains are critical, but at the same time, so is sunshine. First thing we want to look at here, your 1 to 5 day temperature. Not really anything concerning if we're looking at Mato Grosso to Paraná and areas in between. Some days of the 90s. We've talked about this on Tuesday too, Clint. A week of temperatures in the 90s is not going to make or break a crop. You talk about what's hot. You got to have consistency in the hundreds before you really start having a big stress factor on crops. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, particularly down there, you got to keep in mind that their genetics are designed to handle that type of temperature levels. And as we'll see here shortly, they're very well watered. 98 degrees and no water is significantly different than 98 degrees and well watered.
Yep, exactly. Which we see the 1 to 5, the 6 to 10 temperatures actually are becoming more mild, so coming less threatening, and just making another point that temperatures aren't much of a factor right now in crop stress. Next thing I do want to look at here, this is the last 13 days of rainfall. As you can see, throughout the entire Safrinha region, there's been at least some kind of rain. As you can look in the Mato Grosso do Sul to Paraná, there's areas that had slightly less, but overall, they've had enough rain to keep this crop growing. There's no giant storyline that guys can run with. Clint, anything to add to that?
Oh,
Perfect. So moving on. Next thing I want to look at, soil moisture. You can see in the southern areas of Paraná, there's a little bit of surface soil moisture that's below normal. Nothing crazy abnormal and a storyline to run with yet. Continuing the theme of right now, Brazil crop looks really good. Subsoil's pretty much showing the exact same thing. There's some minor areas that you're making up minute percentages of the Safrinha crop. But overall, I mean, if you're looking at Mato Grosso, where half of this crop is, I mean, they almost have too much rainfall, and their moisture has surplus at this time. So next thing I want to look at, coming 1 to 5 day precip, Mato Grosso area has a chance to get a decent amount of rainfall. Everyone else, some scattered small stuff, nothing crazy, but at this time they're not really in big need of rain anyway, so it's pretty much a non-factor.
No, and
Moving
like
to
here in the U.S., a little period of no rain is not bad, guys. We're getting root development, get them roots stretching down, looking for water. It's not a bad thing for them to be dry right now.
exactly. And 6 to 10 day, exact same thing. If this trend continues for the next 3 weeks, then maybe there's something to talk about. But as of right now, this is not a bad thing for them to be having a little bit of a dry spell. Finally, here looking at the 1 to 13 day, I mean, if you combine both, there's still going to be a solid amount of precipitation through this next 2 week period that's going to keep them getting enough to keep the crop growing and without much stress. So on the Safrinha side right now, I hate to sound like the big bad bear, but there's no reason for this market to be impacted in a bullish way from the Safrinha crop. Do you agree with that, Clint?
No, correct. I mean, from a safrinha crop perspective, I mean, production's doing about as well as you could ask for here. That 13-day map is probably one of my favorites. Just shows a good wide window that everybody's going to get some moisture here and tries to help, prevent us from overanalyzing and looking for problems or magnifying problems that maybe aren't as bad as they seem to be. So one of my favorite maps, and yeah, I would agree. We're off to a good start. Now, with that being said, that crop is a very long ways away from being in the bin. Temperatures can be incredibly hot there. And when that's not coupled with the moisture that they need, conditions can change very rapidly. We're moving into the U.S. growing season here very quickly. We're growing we've already got planting going on in the south. So unfortunately, the more and the more that we get into the U.S. growing season, the less and less the Safrinha crop will actually make headlines and whatnot, unless there is an actual problem, which is why we like to break up weather so much here, is to try to remain some focus on that because it is 18% of the total global production. And, Riley and I were chatting, about the corn market earlier, and a lot of people really aren't aware that global ending stocks are at the lowest level since like 2012. So we are at a pretty tight structure globally. So this 18 to 20% of global production is and will remain important moving forward. So we hope you continue to join in and get some value out of this. Later today, right following this, we'll be dropping U.S. weather. Again, a little bit early for that, but never hurts to get started early. Also, today we've got a webinar going on at noon. We're going to throw out some strategies and some thoughts in front of the planning report and quarterly stocks report coming out early next week. If you missed that opportunity to get signed up for that webinar, you can hit us up on our Facebook page. There will probably be some links to it. It'll be posted up on YouTube as well. So be some opportunities to get to know a little bit more about us there. Riley, other than that, you got anything else to add to Safrinha weather?
Not really, other than it's the time of year where weather hasn't been a big impact yet, but the next month and a half is the time where stuff really starts making a difference. So it's not something to keep your eye off of.
I guess the only other one thing I would like to add on that note is that, a lot of guys are really, really, really worried about this report coming up on Monday and all the corn acres coming down the pipeline. Likely it's probably going to happen, guys. But the reality is number one, it's the most inaccurate report of the year. And number two, I would just like to point out that in 2 weeks, nobody's even going to remember what this report, we're going to be so entrenched in weather that weather is king. And ultimately, weather and government's the biggest two things that move markets. That's what my dad always said. So we've certainly got no shortage of weather and government moving markets at this point in the game. So weather will be important moving forward. Hope you tune in. Thanks a lot and have a great day.